Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to this week's edition of the Belonging series. Imperial is one's weekly interview series where we look and explore the experiences of individuals from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. We're looking at their lived experience. And this week it's a pleasure for us to have Izhar Shah. Your sense of belonging as you were growing up. Where did you get that sense of identity from?
Well, so for some reason your mic was not working for a moment, but again, I'll begin with introducing myself. So my name is Izhar Shah, and I'm a postdoc at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. I was born in Pakistan, south of Asia, and then I was I grew up there, attended my early school until high school in my hometown, and then I moved to another city which was about 700 miles away from my hometown, and there I had no relatives, friends, families in that area when I moved there. So it was a completely new experience, going from your hometown where you initially belong. You feel yourself, belonging to that community, that's your friends, your family, and then moving to an area where you don't know anyone. But again, as you spend time in a different area, you learn about that area, the culture, the people who live and study, work with you, and then you start developing a sense of belonging there as well. And again, the place where I went for my undergrad was a different state. So in Pakistan, every state will differ in how the people speak, how they behave. So the cultural differences are very stark. So going to a different state was something very different for me, a new experience. It was like my first experience going to a different culture within Pakistan, of course, but learning from the people of a different culture. Initially, it is sometimes difficult, challenging. You are unable to mix well with the local communities or local people, but with time, and I think it depends on how proactive you are in mixing with the communities. And I think this was the proactive approach helped me mix with the new culture, and also develop a sense of belonging with that culture as well. Of course, I don't call myself like part of that culture because I was just there for like few years. But whenever it comes up in discussions in news or somewhere else, I feel like I have been a sense of belonging to that area, to that region, to that culture.
Could I just stop you for a second, because you've gone straight into it, so I'm going to just pull you back a little bit in terms of you've spoken a lot about culture so far, which I think is really, really interesting. But I was just wondering, in terms of, so when we talk about culture and your sense of belonging, your sense of identity that you developed growing up, what was it? How did you recognize the difference in the culture, and how did that impact on your sense of who you were?
So, like as we are brought up, as we grow, as we go to school early on in our lives, the first things we learn are like they start from our mother language, the first language. So Pakistan is a non-English speaking country, but as I mentioned, there are different states, and every state will have a different language, and within a state there will be different dialects. So I had a belonging to that specific language, like ethnicity, and growing up in that community, you don't hear about anything else. Of course, you see about English movies, Hollywood movies, and Indian movies as well. But again, we feel we are belonging to a specific ethnic group, and we are very comfortable speaking that language, because it happens since like from our childhood. But when we move or transition to a different culture, what happens is there's no one to speak that language. Of course, you can speak the common language, which is Urdu in Pakistan's case, and everyone speaks Urdu. But regionally, the first languages change. So the local people where I moved for my undergrad, they used to speak Punjabi, which was again very new for me, because I could understand a bit of Punjabi initially, but communicating, flawlessly with the locals was a hindrance, and you could feel like you can't merge and mix with them unless you speak, their local language. So that was the biggest challenge I faced. And at that time, as I mentioned, like I was proactive, like to engage with the community to learn. So I started learning the language, and this helped me, develop a sense of belonging with that culture as well. So initially I was thinking that, yes, I belong to a different community or a different city or a different region. And that was the feeling in initial days. But as you develop your relationships, your friendships, and you start, spending more time with those people who are from a different, culture, then you start to develop a sense of belonging with them as well. So I
Right.
think this is the transition, from one culture to another. And yes, I'll be, sharing my experiences when I moved outside of my home country. So that was
Yeah.
like a complete 180-degree switch. So yeah, please, if you have any questions.
Yeah. No, I like the way that you describe it as by developing and learning the language, you're then embracing that culture. You then get that a greater sense of belonging because you now understand it slightly better. Which I think for some people who are monolingual, only speaking one language as such, they're missing that richness of understanding another culture. So I do like that. In terms of like your moral values and the things which you uphold, where did that develop from as you were growing up? Did you have any role models, anything like that, who helped to develop that sense of identity, belonging in you?
Yeah, sure. So like growing up, my father was like a role model for me. So professionally, he was a judge, a magistrate at the regional court. So we used to hear a lot about law, human rights, freedom of speech, and things like that. And he was like a proactive advocate of these things, and like the things I've mentioned. And he always, like, we learn from him that we have to be open, we have to be courteous, respectful. We should be sharing our own thoughts freely without any coercion, as well as, be able to listen to other views of even if it's the opposing side. So, that makes you more open to accepting ideas which you feel like challenging to your own existing ideas. But I think that from my family and from my father, I gathered that sense of responsibility, where as a citizen, we have certain rights, but at the same time we can't encroach upon the rights of other citizens, and communicating peacefully and openly. So that was the inspiration that came from my father. And then of course it helped me, learning new experiences, learning new cultures, and then developing sense of belonging after learning those cultures. So I think that was, the stepping stone that comes from my family. And it helped me, develop a sense of belonging to different parts of the world. So
Yeah.
it's if you ask me, like, what's your sense of belonging, is it to any specific region, I would say no. I have a sense of belonging to every part where I've been living and working. That's on a personal level. But if you ask me, like, professionally, do you feel sense of belonging, I would go beyond borders. What I would say is, I'm working in the environmental sector.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, reducing
Yeah.
the carbon emissions, reducing the climate change impacts. And for that, I developed a sense of belonging towards, the world, the environment, and the communities living within. So it might be not very normal. People might be, feeling more belong to a certain group, certain faith, or certain beliefs, political parties, and etc. But at the same time, I believe that I have a belonging. I feel belonging to the world, to the environment, and I feel passionate about, reducing the impact. So this is like the personal and professional levels of belonging I feel.
I'm going to just explore a little bit more with you, just the idea, a couple of the ideas which you put forward, which is that idea of belonging wherever you've encountered, you gain that sense of belonging. And that, I think, came from what you've said, that moral values, those values which your father instilled in you, to have an open mind in whatever you see and receive. So can you give us a little bit about your experiences of different places? So you mentioned about the fact that you studied in a different part of Pakistan, but after your study, where else did you study? Was it just in Pakistan? Where else did you study, and what other cultures did you engage with, and how did they impact you?
Yeah, so I think the journey within Pakistan was when I moved to undergrad to a different state. Then after completing my undergrad, I moved to a different city, which was a bit closer to my hometown, but again, it was the largest city. It is the largest city of Pakistan. So it is way more diverse, way more developed, and way more fast paced. So I worked there in the industry, and it was, an experience of meeting every community that's existing in Pakistan. So because it's like a metropolitan, the largest metropolitan, so larger industries, more companies where people work. And then I moved to the capital city of Pakistan, which was again more than 1,000 miles from my hometown. So this was again a larger switch, and I stayed there, studied my master's, and then started working there in a university as a lecturer. So working in a capital city, which is like more bureaucratic, people are more polite. You would see that on roads, in restaurants, like people are more polite, more courteous, more welcoming. So that was a different experience, like interacting with that kind of polite, courteous people. And from there, in 2017, I moved to South Korea, where I spent like 3.5 years. Now that was a big switch, because in South Korea they don't speak like usually they don't speak English. In Pakistan, English is in a way a form of official language. So most of the documentation takes place in English, exams, university education in English. So I was like well equipped with English. However, when I decided to move to South Korea based on my research interests, the biggest challenge I faced was like I was unable to like interact with the local people. And initially you feel alienated, like you think about if they want to talk and engage with you at all, or is it your fault, or something like that. So different feelings come to your mind. Again, it could be like devastating for someone who is not planning to integrate, but I took again the proactive path of learning their culture and the language. So the first step was I started learning their language, the Korean language. So that helped me integrate with the local people. So I was able to talk, not at the very proficient level, but of course I started with the basic level and then gradually improved my language. That helped me integrate and learn about their system, and also make relationships, make friends, make colleagues. And that made me develop a sense of belonging with South Korea, the city I was living in, Ulsan, as well as the university I was attending. So these things really helped me to develop a sense of belonging. when I look like backwards, I would say like if I wouldn't have like developed language skills, I would have like been unable to make any friends or enjoy any local culture. So I think learning about, again, I've been to different parts of the world as well, not like stayed there for longer periods, but on shorter visits.
Mm-hmm.
And because we spend short time, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks in certain areas, we don't, develop a sense of belonging to that area.
Yeah.
So you must have been to different parts of the world. But if I ask you, you belong to that place, you will say simply no,
Yeah.
because you stayed a very short duration of time and were unable to make relationships or friends there. But when you spend several years, I think that is the perfect time to learn about them.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when you integrate, I think the best part is that you are able to show who you are and who where you belong to. Like in my case, I was able to share with them the culture of Pakistan from all parts of the Pakistan where I've been working before. So it opened the door, like a two-way communication door, where South Korean friends and colleagues were able to learn something about my culture, uh, how life goes on in those parts of the world, as well as share about their culture. So this is how the transition. And just to to close my comment, I moved to the UK early
Yeah.
last year, and again, the biggest advantage was that I was able to speak English.
Yeah.
So the first part of integration was very smooth.
Yeah.
And the second part was the Imperial was a place I found that the Imperial is more welcoming, more vibrant. The vibe is very positive.
Mm-hmm.
We, as people from Asian communities or even from BAME, we are given opportunities to participate, to lead activities, to
Mm-hmm.
to engage with the community, with the society, with the scientific community. I think that was the positive experience that Imperial has been giving us. I think that made me like develop a sense of belonging with Imperial as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I must mention that last November, I was nominated as an Imperial COP26 delegate
Mm-hmm.
to take part and represent Imperial at the climate change conference in Glasgow.
Yeah.
And it was a different feeling when I got the email from the director of Grantham Institute, like we would be happy to have you on our team, because I was under the impression, of course, we interact with people, with students, with other staff, that somehow there are opportunities, but somehow we are like we might be at a disadvantage because of where we're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But as I mentioned, the proactive approach is like you reaching out to people. If you
Mm-hmm.
see there's an opportunity, you just apply and reach out and see if there are opportunities available and given to you. And it happened. So I've witnessed. So whenever anyone was asking like, where are you from, I was telling them like I'm from Imperial. And then if someone is interested in like where I'm from, where I was born, then of course we could go ahead and discuss that as well. But that sense of feeling and belonging, that Imperial College is welcoming you, giving you opportunities. So that was something that I've developed in recent months, and I'm very happy to be working at Imperial College. And yeah, the experience has been great so far.
That's brilliant. That's really a heartwarming account of your time coming into Imperial, and not just Imperial. I like the way that you describe the importance of sharing and learning from each other. Okay, the fact that when you were in Korea, for you to be able to enjoy what was going on, you had to commit yourself to learning. You couldn't just say, well, they have to do what I want to do. You had to learn what they were doing in order to really enjoy and get the most of your experience. And then when you came to Imperial, that idea of I just want to ask the question, How did you and your family feel when you got that email saying we would like you to be? What was that feeling like for you? That feeling of inclusion. What was it like for you?
Yes, so I was like overwhelmed. I initially I was not planning because I did apply, but I thought maybe someone else will get the opportunity, or I might be not the perfect candidate. But yes, when I got the email, it was very like overwhelming. I shared it with my family, and they were very happy. Like the family, they are very happy when they see you grow, and they are satisfied. You are working at a place which provides you opportunities, platforms for growth, professional development. I think that was a very positive feedback that my family received, and then again shared with me. So yeah, it was like a very positive feedback, very positive feeling, and very encouraging sign that yes, uh, there might be like experiences with people where they faced discrimination or opportunities not given due to their race or from where they're coming from. But I think slowly and slowly, once we get involved in the system, once we proactively pursue opportunities, I think, and if you are committed, if you have talent, and if you are committed to different tasks and different activities, I think uh, we will be getting those opportunities and those experiences. And it depends on us as well. So yeah, it depends on us as well, like how proactive we are, how dedicated we are, and how motivated we feel about different work and job.
Yeah. So when you were at the COP26 and you were doing your presentation, and even it, can I ask two questions, right? Two follow-up questions, really. And one of them is, what is it about the environmental studies, the climate change and everything, which really attracted you to that field for the first part? And then the second part is, when you were in that environment with politicians and everybody else, what was it that gave you your sense of, I should be here, I have a voice?
Okay, so the first part, so I was working in industry, as I mentioned, and we already we all the time we used to receive reports and our clients seeking information on our environmental compliance and performance. So from there on, I started developing a sense of what the environment is, how the industries affect the environment, and how to calculate what the impact is of our production, and how do we report it to our clients, and of course to the public as well. So that made me, when I started developing reports of environmental compliance, what the waste is, what the emissions are, that made me more intrigued to learn something more advanced at an advanced level, and then apply it somewhere that it could benefit the society. So then after like 2.5 years, I decided that I'll be quitting my job, which was a very good paid job, and then I'll be going back into academia, where I'll be starting to study. And I like transition from working professional to a student again. That was a big switch for me. Some of my friends were not like suggesting to go that path, but I thought like it was coming from the inside. I wanted to learn more so that I could do more.
Yeah.
So that paved the way to enter the environmental sciences and engineering field. And the second part was about the can you rephrase
The
the
second
second
part
part?
was about when you were actually at COP26 and you're there with the politicians and delegates from across the world. How did you feel that you fitted in? What was it that you felt that you could contribute? How did you find your voice?
So the voice, so at COP26, I was able to meet ministers. Like that was like a very common thing. In the pavilions, you find ministers most of the time. Country heads are rare, but I was able to meet several country heads as well. Of course, they don't discuss with you; they just meet, and you are able to say a couple of words or maybe a few sentences to them, quickly. But with ministers, I was able to communicate what we as researchers think the solution is, and what you as policymakers could do to mitigate the climate issue. And the first person I met was the South Korean Minister for the Environment. And when I went to their pavilion, and I introduced myself, they were very welcoming. Like, there was already a connection between us. And then I also went to the Pakistani pavilion where the Minister for Environment was there. And then I was able to communicate, what we as scientists, as engineers think about this issue and what you as policymakers could do. So I think that was like a sharing what science has to say, because politics depend on, public opinion, but science depends on facts. And the facts are very clear on climate change. So I was able to, communicate and try to share what our work means and how like we collectively could do better for the environment. So the two-way communication, with the policymakers of the world, and of course with different delegates of those participating there at COP26, that was a very positive experience. And I like the intention was to like share what we have been doing and how things could be changed. And I think as an individual, I did my best. I hosted an exhibition as well. I hosted a couple of remote virtual presentations as well, engaging students from different communities from developing world, so that they know what's happening inside the COP26 venue. So I think that was, the overall motivation was to engage more and more people, and of course engage with the policymakers to make them aware about the climate impacts and what science has to offer.
So just kind of like concluding on that part is, what impact would you like to have seen happen from the COP26 based on the communications which you've had with the various ministers and people there?
Well, to be honest, there are certain limitations to come for countries to commit to climate action, and some are understandable and some are dependent on how collectively we go about it. So expectations were quite high, and I think things have moved in the right direction, but I think there is more to be done. Of course, the biggest impediment is lack of collective action. So individual countries committing like we go net zero by this, we go net zero by this, will make an impact, of course. But if every country decides and they collectively develop a formula where there is a compromise, sacrifice of economic development somewhere, but also we get potential environmental benefits somewhere else. So like because this is a global phenomena, so that was my main talking point. Like, let's do something that's collective rather than individual acts, which are great, of course, but individual acts will impede or will slow down the ultimate impact we want.
It has to be a collective change. It can't be just it has to be collective. So just finally on this point, I think going forward, you mentioned about that whole collective approach. I'm just thinking about it in terms of that sense of belonging, okay? And that actually the sense of belonging that we need to have is that the whole world has to recognize that we all belong here together, and we all need to have some kind of, we need to do something collectively to make a change, make a difference. And you mentioned about the formula. If there was one or two things which you would like to see people commit to, what would you say that would be?
Well, the biggest challenge right now is in the rising consumerism. So everyone wants their own house, their own car, their own garage, their own like everything. individuals, and the population is increasing. So maintaining all that stuff for everyone around the world is going to be like very impactful on the environment. So I would suggest you should pursue minimalism. You should go for things that are actually necessary rather than things that could be avoided. So avoid those things, and try to create awareness among your families, among your groups, among your colleagues, that individual actions can really impact, and what we do at the individual level could really benefit the environment and the society in the long run.
So it's act locally but think globally. So
Yeah.
we need to, and as individuals, we need to look and see what we're doing, and if more of us are doing the right thing, then collectively we should hopefully see a bigger difference going forward.
Yes, I think some people rely too much on governments. So what happens is that they somehow ignore the impact they are making individually, and they just forget, like, okay, if the government is doing something or nothing, we'll see some benefits. But I think individually, and when I say individually, I mean that the awareness is going to increase. So if you are practicing or you are consuming less electricity, your family will practice the same thing with you, and eventually your community, that's the city, the council, or the entire state will develop that habit. So I think moving in that direction slowly, gradually, will help us. Of course, governments are in a better position to decide, but we can't force governments to go net zero by a certain time period. It's dependent on the public opinion as well. So when we have more public opinion demanding net zero early, then of course the governments will be forced to select that path. So I think individual action, then of course going beyond individual action to communities, regions, I think that's the best path I could suggest to people around us.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm just going to open it up and see if there's anyone who's in the audience with us who would like to ask a question for Izhar this afternoon. Is there any questions coming forward? Otherwise, I have a few more. Izhar's gone off camera for a second. I'm not sure. Right. Okay. Right. I think you've wowed them with all of your discussions. Just then, Izhar, I was just thinking in terms of one of the things which you mentioned quite a bit was about culture. How do you think culture has an influence on how environmental change or changing climate, etc., can be achieved? Do you think it's a barrier? Do you think it's how can we develop it to make a more inclusive culture with environmental considerations?
Well, I don't see culture, like in a specific culture, impacting the environment the most. I think this phenomena of consuming more, producing more waste, and very extravagant with consuming resources, energy, water, and other products. So I think that's consumerism being promoted at the global level. So you see every company promoting a new product every day. So that's the rush to buy something new, buy and consume something that's not usually required. I think that's something that should be reduced, stopped. Of course it helps in growing economically. There are more jobs, but somewhere we have to like strike a balance between what individual needs are or human needs are, and how much they are actually over consuming at the moment. So because the population is increasing, so ultimately more and more will be needed to satisfy human needs. So I think that's the biggest issue we face. And culture, you might say, like, there, like in literature, there is a division that developed countries, including the UK, they tend to produce more waste compared to a developing country. So there is a contrast between the two at some level, but I think developing countries, the people have low income, so they consume less. Developed countries, people have more income, so they are able to make more choices. So that's why the higher waste is coming from. But again, there's going to be a collective action. Like, I don't blame a specific culture for that, but yeah, the culture of consumerism, everything you have to buy, everything for yourself, more and more products just to feel good. I think that culture is a culprit, not like a culture of a specific region or a specific area.
No, that's kind of like what I was trying to say. I think you articulated it better than I did in terms of consumerism being a major problem.
And the problem with consumerism is that you don't feel, a sense of belonging with a product. So that's the problem. People want to have like a sense of belonging, so they tend to sometimes buy extra stuff. But the problem is that you don't feel a sense of belonging with your personal products. There's the challenge, and this is the reason why I suggest people to move away from consumerism, move towards using less and less products, materials, and just to be impacting the environment less and less.
So I'm going to ask two more questions, and the first one being thinking about the next generation. Okay, thinking about the next generation, what would you like to be the legacy that we pass on to the next generation?
So I think I would like to see like the next generation have a greater sense of belonging to the world, to the environment, and I think that would really change how we think about the environment. Rather than a dumping site, we would act it as a something that we have to preserve. And because we feel a sense of belonging with the world, with the environment, the ecosystems, the species living here. So I think that would be my greatest desire, to see the next generation developing a sense of belonging. I think the awareness, the discussions we are making today will create that belonging in the future, and I'm hopeful about that as well.
Fantastic. I see that we've got a question. Crystal, you've got your question, and then I'll...
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, fine.
This has been excellent. So Izhar, I'm very interested in what you're saying, because I think it's one of the first times I've heard someone speaking about climate change being remedied through identity with the environment. And it reminds me, I took an environmental ethics course during my undergraduate degree, and that was actually the entire approach of my professor. So we never really spoke about climate change at all. It was mostly, reading text I'm from Canada, and we were reading a lot of text from First Nations peoples and, interpretations of the environment and how to work. So I'm wondering, I guess first, it's interesting to me that you have this approach and this thought process into how we can actually get people to engage in doing something about climate change. And I'm wondering where that came from. But I also am wondering how you are translating your work, or if you are translating your work and communicating with kind of the public in that same vein of kind of fostering a care and an identity with the environment, rather than explicitly speaking about science, which I think can sometimes be a bit difficult for people to understand.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal. Yes, I agree. Like the thoughts of your professor. So there are people advocating that thinking. For me, this thing developed when I started learning more about the environment, the impact we are creating as humans, and initially, like before that, I used to see myself belonging to a different culture, different country, or maybe a region, but but knowing the problems, the global scale of pollution and environmental impacts, I started to develop a sense of feeling with the environment and with the world as well, with the ecosystems. So that was something that I experienced when I had already experienced different cultures. So I think that opened, the way to make yourself or feel yourself connected with that global ecosystem. And how I do it, like, again, person at the individual level, I've been carrying out like public engagement activities as well. So I used to help students and families understand what the climate change is and how they could make a difference. So I recently led a workshop at the Science Museum where we displayed different construction materials. So that included concrete, cement, mortar, bricks, aluminium, steel. And there were families coming and joining us. And I explained like what these materials are and how they affect the environment. And you must be aware around you that many construction buildings are being erected, and that the sector is booming all around the world. So it is impacting the environment. So I wanted to convey like individual choices of materials can help you. And then another workshop I led was on making graffiti designs on climate, so that children, they could make something in an artistic way and convey their feelings and message to those who are younger or older than them, and they are able to do something. So they must learn something from children. So I've been doing those activities, and I've been involved in those as well. So just the idea is to communicate with the people that the world needs you, that the earth, the environment needs your support. And this is the way I think one could develop a sense of belonging with the world and with the earth and the environment as well.
Thank you. That's great.
Thanks, Crystal, for that really, really good question. The whole idea about that connection, we are connected. The environment isn't something separate to us. We are part of the environment, and we're having impacts on the environment. But it's also, I think from the discussion, I think the influence of your father about being open-minded, listening to the different viewpoints has really helped you to navigate and assimilate and to understand the world in which we live in a slightly different manner to a lot of people. I'm going to ask one final question, and that final question is, what advice would you have given to your 16-year-old self, somebody who's starting out now, about their journey on their sense of belonging, their sense of identity? What would you have told them?
Well, I would have told them, like, be yourself, be proud of your culture. You don't have to be hiding your identity just because you are living in a different country or a different culture. You have to be open. Don't feel bad about anything from where you belong to, and also develop a sense of commitment towards the world, to the global communities, the societies, because climate change or the environmental degradation is one issue, but I think globally, as a global citizen, it should be, you should be feeling committed to the prosperity of the world as well, fighting hunger, fighting lack of education, lack of facilities, lack of drinking water. So these are the things people are facing at the moment. So we have to develop a sense of belonging to the world and the people living inside. So this is something that I would have told and informed my 16-year-old self.
So it's not just about what we have now, it's about what can be shared across the world. It's more than just me, it's we.
Yeah.
Yeah. Izhar, it's been absolutely brilliant having your insight and your sharing your story with us this afternoon. And I just want to give you just say another really big thank you, and to encourage you to continue with the work which you're doing, because it's very important. And I think some people don't realize just how important it is. So another really big thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. I enjoyed this discussion as well, and hopefully we'll have more discussions in the future coming up as well.
Definitely, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I'm going to just share with the audience what's happening next week. And so next week we've got Jan Etienne, who is a lecturer in social sciences, history and philosophy at Birkbeck. And she's going to be sharing with us her experiences, her sense of identity and belonging. And if you have missed any of the previous interviews, or you want to watch this one again, then please go to our YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/belonging-IAO. And you can then see other videos of individual stories of their sense of belonging. But I want to wish everyone a really good weekend, and I hope to see you all again next week. So thanks very much, and see you again soon.